So the big square brush, and I got some really soupy orange paint on it, and this isn't going on my desk anywhere. I'm just running my finger over it and it's spattering in an area. So now that I know I have the right consistency on my test paper, I am going to go ahead and do a layer of that, keeping in mind that I'm not going to want to splatter where there's not trees, because this splatter painting is all about leaves. It's about giving the appearance of leaves on my tree. So I'm going to do a layer of one color, and then I might do maybe 3 colors, but I want to keep this, like I said, fairly light, because if each layer, and if it's not dark enough, remember, less water. So it is important to always have your paper towels on hand in case you want a thicker consistency. We don't want our paper to ever get too wet, too overworked, or we're going to have some problems with the solidness of that paper. So I'm going to do 3 colors lightly, because I will come back in and do more of those later. So I'm choosing to do red, brown, and orange for my first couple colors, just a real light layer of splatter paint, keeping in mind that I'll be doing more of this later. And then I'm also going to move to the ground, and I might do like a teeny bit of, keeping in mind what is going to be darker, the very foreground or the middle ground. When we're talking about perspective, are the things closer to us going to appear lighter or darker? Yes? Darker. So I want to think that way. I want to think down here at the bottom, this is going to be a little bit darker. So maybe I'll just add a little bit of texture here at the bottom, looking like some fallen leaves around the base of some of these trees in the similar colors, maybe a little more brown because they've been on the ground a little bit longer. And then making those, adding just a teeny bit of water to that so that these ones in the back, there's still some shadows, but maybe a little less so in the background where it's going to be darker. If I wanted, I could even kind of add a very light, shadow coming. We just want to make sure that that shadow was going the same direction on any tree that I chose. So just real light on the background for now. And I also might darken up with just another layer of color on top if it's light in some other areas. Keeping in mind that I'm going to be doing more layers later. So I'm still keeping this pretty light, but it's going to slowly get darker and darker. So now that I've done these 2 things, I'm going to wait for this to dry just a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and, after it's dried, I'm going to peel my back 2 trees only. So that would be the smallest of my trees. And you want to be super careful because the paper does sometimes tear. So even though it's going to tear, I just think of that as adding a little bit of texture to my bark, but I'm going to kind of press down around the areas where it starts to tear. Just go very, very slowly so that I'm not ripping my paper. If it does start to rip, just fix that really quick. Or you could try going from the other side. Sometimes works a little bit better. But see, if my paper starts to rip off, I'm just going to put my finger on the paper and fix that really quick. This is a little bit of a tricky part because the tape does sometimes catch. There's a little patch right there, but that's just a good place to put a branch or something else. So that's my most furthest back tree. This is why it's important, if you haven't done the tape yet, to do your back trees last, because they're the ones that you'll be peeling first. So again, really careful when we're peeling these off, and make sure you don't rip that paper too much, especially off to the sides. And if you got your paper really saturated, you're going to want to wait to do this. So if you have a branch overlapping from another tree, you're going to want to leave that one there, because that's going to get painted very last. While I'm waiting for this paint to dry, I might just erase any pencil lines. I don't want to do this at all when my paper is wet, because it'll stick. So after our trees are cleared, we can get a detail brush, a small round brush. And the small round brush is going to be used for a couple colors. And I have some colors up here that I will give you guys that are not in your palette. These are another kind of watercolor that you can use. They come in a tube, and I don't usually put them out or use these in class, because if they're not stored properly or used properly, they dry out. You only need a teeny bit of these because they're concentrated, just like the paint in your palette. So you just need a teeny bit of these colors, which are burnt umber and then a yellow ochre. And you can see they're just a little more, they're a little deeper, and these colors that come in palettes like this are a little more intense. There's some brands of these paints for like watercolor enthusiasts. These are a student brand, so it's like $7 for, like 5 of these. But if you go to, I don't know, like Joann's or Beeman's, you can spend $14 on 1 tube of watercolor paint. That's how important clarity and intensity is to some artists, where watercolor might be their specialty. So I'm going to get my brush wet, and I'm going to do a wet and wet on my tree first. So that means I'm painting just water onto this tree trunk. And then what I'm going to do is, there's lines on birch trees that come out from the side. So really carefully with this brush, I'm not going to go and make stripes on my tree, okay? I'm going to work with just a little bit of color, and it's going to bleed naturally. So I'm almost just dotting color, kind of coming out from the edges of my tree. Especially for this one in the background, and with the water that spreads so fast on this, I don't want to add a lot of color to this, or I'm going to end up with a really freaky looking tree. So the water's going to carry that color. I just want to add a teeny bit. And if you leave these colors in your palette, you can use them even after they've dried out. If I know that I made my shadows kind of coming this way, I might also make a little line on some parts of that non-sunny side of the tree. And then after that kind of dries, I might even go in with my black watercolor, and in the centers of some of these, just put a teeny bit of black paint. So if I can zoom in on this tree, you can kind of see what I'm doing here a little bit better. Just teeny dots. You can't even see the paint on my brush. It's so minuscule. That color carries, that black or brown just really carries with that little teeny bit of water that I put in just with this brush. So after that, after it's kind of dry, you'll notice that with this tree, I didn't put any branches because it's so far back that I can just use this detail brush and I can add a few branches. If my splatter is dry, And if not, I'll probably go in and add more branches later with the yellow ochre or the brown, because we've seen in our pictures that the branches on birch are really thin, and that they will, off of the big branches, there's going to be the smaller branches and smaller branches and smaller branches. So there's my first tree. Again, I'll go ahead and demo that on the second one because it is a little hard to get. So let's see, my second tree is all the way over here, so you can see the empty white spot where that is. Again, I'm just going to use this wet and wet first, right? So it's kind of weird, but I'm going to clean my brush and I'm just going to paint with water. Right? Where am I? There. Okay. So I'm just painting with water here on this empty white paper that's left empty from the masking tape. And then I'm going to get a little bit of this burnt umber and just do dots coming away from the sides in a few places. And that water is going to carry that color. Again, if I want a little bit of a darker side, I can paint the darker side of the tree just lightly though. The key to watercolors is you can always add more paint, right? But you can't really take it away once you've added it. So I always find that it's better to be a little bit modest with my application of this paint than it is to overdo it and then kind of regret it. So just kind of dotting in those browns, and then when we come back and look at it from a distance, you're just going to see these nice light kind of areas on that tree, so it still looks like a birch. It doesn't look like a solid color, because there's a reason we left that area white, and it's because we want that white to shine through brightly. All right, so first step, splatter. Second step is add another layer to the ground. Remember we did the kind of the stippling with a large brush. So I'll make a list of this and take a picture. Step 1 was splatter leaves. So we don't want to splatter where there's not going to be leaves. 2, stippling on the ground with a large brush. 3 is peeling how many trees? 2. Back 2. And then 4 is our wet and wet. Teeny lines from the side, not all the way through. From the side of the trunk. And just keep up your great work with light painting and light application of those colors, and that should work